The tomahawk ribeye is my favorite steak, but does injecting it with beef tallow make it better? Today, we're gonna find out. Hey, I'm James from Smoking Dad Barbecue, and today I'm trying something I've never done before, and I can't promise it's gonna be good, but I can promise to let you know my honest opinion if it's something you should try at home or not. And that is injecting our gorgeous tomahawk ribeye with beef tallow. Now, I was a little surprised on my last experiment where I did confit cooking with beef tallow. It was better than I thought. I'm not saying I would rush out and do it again. It's a lot of work to render down that much beef tallow to cook a steak in that, and I just absolutely love my normal reverse sear method, and I think you're giving up some of that crust and the reaction that you get versus cooking it in the tallow the entire time. The crust just didn't have that same crunch and texture that I'm used to. But I saw another video where brisket was injected with beef tallow, and apparently it was amazing. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, since this video and many others are all promoting the same Amazon affiliate link for, in my opinion, overpriced Wagyu beef tallow. I've had it before. I've made my own. Honestly, for my tongue, I can't taste the difference. So I don't think you need to spend 40 bucks for this stuff versus just using your brisket trimmings, but to each their own. What I'm curious about is this actually something that improves the tomahawk ribeye experience, or is this all just part of an internet fad that should be put to rest sooner than later? And while we're speaking of internet fads and doing beef tallow, let's go crazy, because that's exactly what I'm going to substitute for butter today in our foil pouch baked potatoes that we're going to throw directly on the coals. Let's get started. So to prep for today's cook, all I did is pull out a couple tablespoons of our beef tallow, melt that, and then wait for it to turn a little bit more into a pudding texture versus being just liquid gold that will run right through our meat injector, as I forgot that that would happen. And my first experiment, you'll see here quickly, that's exactly what I did. Filled it up, melted liquid gold right out the end. So after giving that a few more minutes just to come back to room temperature, and I had that right consistency, take two, I put a couple spoonfuls into the meat injector and got to work at making some pockets inside our tomahawk ribeye, just moving around and giving myself a little bit of space to inject our beef tallow. Once all the injection was in, like normal, I continued with my salt brine. So I'm using Diamond Crystal kosher salt for today's salt brine. Put that on a drying rack and threw that in the refrigerator overnight so we get the full benefits of the salt brine, just like normal. So let me tell you how we're going to set up for today's cook. Now, normally I'm a huge fan of the hot and fast, but my worry here is since we've injected this tomahawk with our tallow, if I go hot and fast, we might render that fat right away and it'll just quickly run out of our steak like if you were melting butter for popcorn, and we may not get any benefit of that. So my game plan is to go low and slow. Really low and slow, somewhere around 200 to 220 degrees Fahrenheit, I think will be perfect, and give us the opportunity to find out if this injection method is worth pursuing or not. But going at these really, really low temperatures in the Kamado, I've already found exasperates a couple of things. A, it's hard to get nice, clean smoke, and at low temperatures, you really accentuate the different flavor profiles of the charcoal that you're using. So charcoal, if you never heard me say this before, is a lot like a seasoning, and so what's a great seasoning for a chicken may not be the right seasoning for a steak and vice versa. And so I'm gonna go with Fogo Super Premium today for a couple reasons. One, it comes in on the lighter, more mild side of the smoke flavor. That's not going to be the first thing that we notice. Plus, at these low temperatures, I think it burns a little bit more cleanly. So we're not going to get dirty smoke and or too strong of a flavor. And the second thing that I'm going to do for today's cook, I'm going to be using my meat hook. I've just been having fun playing with this. You guys have asked in some other videos, you know, why don't you just use the rotisserie? Only reason I'm not using the rotisserie for today's cook is I don't want that spit running all the way through the tomahawk. So the meat hook, I'm able to drill a hole in the bone, hang it right from the vent cap, and get that same benefit that the rotisserie provides, which is that natural lump charcoal, any drippings coming down, hitting that and infusing it with a great aromatic and smoky taste and smell, and I think it's going to pull off the perfect tomahawk. So while we're waiting for the temperature to come up in our Kamado Joe, Big Joe, and just give that charcoal a chance to catch and get some great hot coals that'll rake out and spread around once they're fully ignited and going and my dome is hot, I'll adjust my bottom vent down to about a pinky's width, and that top cap, as you can see, is sitting about the 60% mark between 0 and the first line. So that should be able to hold the temperatures that we're after today. While we're waiting for everything to stabilize, it's the perfect time to season our steak. And so I'm gonna try, and we're doing a couple things different already. I normally like to do just one thing different, but since we're doing the tallow and we're doing the meat hook on a ribeye for the first time, or a tomahawk ribeye, I'm gonna try and keep everything else as similar as possible. And so I'm gonna use my favorite binder, so I'm gonna hit it with some truff hot sauce. You can substitute even Frank's hot sauce or anything like that will give you that same umami depth, smoky flavor that this hot sauce adds. But I just find you do notice that little bit of kick of truffle that the obviously truff hot sauce has. So if you can find anything with truffle in it and hot sauce, I think you're off to the races. Then I'm gonna add some garlic and some fresh cracked black pepper. That's it. I'll insert my meter probe and I'm gonna put it near the top on the bone side, just so that I'm not directly above the coals. And I've measured in a previous video, because of the draft up top, that it's actually the hottest up top. So I think I'm gonna get very similar temperatures from the the spinalis cap on the ribeye to the very top end here near the bone. Now, when I did my first hole and test fit my meat hook and went to close the dome, I did notice it was sitting almost, not quite in the coals, but directly above them. So I took the opportunity before we got started to add a second hole a little bit closer to where our ribeye is, because I'm using a 10-inch meat hook, so that's already hanging down. When I add then another 10 inches or so for the bone, this is just a little bit too much hang time down to, above our live fire coals. So second hole looks like it is perfect. Let me now move on to tell you how we're gonna prep the potatoes while we've got our tomahawk on the grill. So I'm using small waxy potatoes. I'm just gonna cut those in half so that I'm able to get a little bit more surface area to crisp up. So once we've got those all cut in half, I'm gonna throw them into a foil pouch and just drizzle over some of that leftover beef tallow that we have. And I think this will be a perfect combination for the potatoes, since this is, again, infused with garlic, rosemary, thyme. These are all friends of potatoes, friends of tomahawk ribeyes. And so once I've got that on with some extra garlic and salt and pepper, I'm gonna wrap that as tight as I can and make a nice little foil pouch and throw that directly on the coals. If we were doing a full russet potato or something like that, I would plan to have it on the coals for over an hour, but since these guys are really small, I think they'll cook in half the time. So I'm planning for about 30 minutes of having them on the coals directly, but we'll check when our tomahawk is getting ready for inferno mode if they're gonna need a little bit of extra time or not. I'll rejoin you once it is ready to move on to stage 2 and crank up the heat for an inferno mode sear. All right, we're ready for inferno mode. Let's get this off. All right, I'm excited. We are nearly up to temperature for inferno mode, but when I was probing some other spots just off camera there, it was as if I had popped a water balloon, except we're not dealing with a normal water balloon. We are dealing with a tallow injected tomahawk ribeye, and so far I think this is promising. Let me know in the comments if you think it's gonna work out, but if it's held on to that much fat content for the entire cook, I can't help but think this is going to be a winner. Let me know in the comments below. We'll find out together in just a minute. I'll bring you nice and close for our next step as we get ready for our inferno mode sear. And in case you're wondering how we're going to do it today, we're doing it caveman style, directly on the coals. So I'm going to wait till they're hot and ashed over, and I've got a nice coal bed, and we're going to drop it right into the coals, get a quick little sear on all sides, and be ready to slice into it and find out how we did. All right, it's go time. Like this. All right, right, that sear is looking good. Let's get this off. Just let it rest a minute. That is gorgeous. Really even edge to edge sear and a perfect medium rare. I can't wait to try this. All right, moment of truth. Taste time. Everything looks and smells incredible, so there's no tells outside of maybe the taste test in terms of whether or not this is a good idea or a bad idea. The only thing I can notice differently is there are the few holes as I was cutting into it from our injection, which can't say visually as nice. There's one right there. I don't know if you can see that, but otherwise, this is a juicy steak, so I can't wait to see if that taste is good or maybe this is a little bit of overkill. Let's start with our potatoes. So those look and smell great. Got a few little charred, but I like a little bit of texture and variety. Everything else looks really good. So let's go ahead and just grab one. Not overdone, anything like that. Well seasoned. Let's try it. Okay. Yep. That's good. Not only is that good, that's better than butter. So I don't need to try another one. Tallow potatoes, that's a win. Let's go ahead and try our tomahawk. I've got a little bit of smoked sea salt just in case it needs it, but let's try a piece first without that. Looks good. That's interesting. I'm going to do a second piece, see whether or not we give this a verdict. I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to try one piece with salt and another piece without, just to see where we're at. One more here. Okay, so before we get to the salt one, compared to the confit steak that we did, where it was cooked in tallow, this is way less crazy rich. That tallow in confit cooked steak was ridiculously rich, almost to the point where it's like, I don't want to eat too many pieces because it is so heavy. Good news here is this is not getting that same sort of signature Wagyu richness where a few pieces is more than enough to satisfy your craving, but at the same time, this is different. This is different than any tomahawk ribeye I've ever done. Let me go ahead and try a piece with my sort of signature finishing salt here, a bit of smoked maldrons. Give that a try. I didn't know if this was going to work. It definitely works. That is a really, really good steak. Now, a ribeye is my favorite steak, or a tomahawk ribeye is my favorite steak anyways, so I'm naturally going to like it. Whether or not it is that much better than a regular one, I think sadly I might have to repeat this test and do one side by side to see if I prefer it versus the regular garden variety tomahawk ribeye. But I'm definitely picking up a couple things. I'm getting some of those aromatics, which is surprising. We've got the tallow, which we infused with thyme and rosemary, and I'm getting a little bit of fresh garden aromatic taste, which we didn't add any of those in our seasoning. We just did salt and pepper and garlic, and yet I'm still able to find a little bit of that aromatic freshness from our infused tallow, which is amazing, and I was not expecting that. The other thing I will say compared to the confit steak is this is just preferable for me. This is the right balance of some of that richness without pushing it over to the edge. And you can really overdo this. You know, I've seen some of these videos and you're adding a whole bunch of beef tallow. This is kind of like just taking your steak or brisket, whatever you're doing, and dipping it in motor oil. It's like, that's a little bit gross. And once a steak or brisket is fully cooked, it can't absorb any of that fat. So you're just drenching the outside with that oily surface. This feels completely different. So I don't know if it's because it was cooked in it and that gave it a chance to actually, you know, penetrate the meat a little bit more differently. Hopefully some of you more scientific minds will be able to let me know the science behind that. But from just a taste perspective, this is a win. Really enjoyed this cook and really enjoyed the method of hanging that low and slow and going right for that caveman sear, where we cooked this entire meal without using any heat deflectors or any cooking grids. It was just a meat hook and our natural lump charcoal providing all that flavor. So I'm going to give this 2 thumbs up. This is a pass. I would do this again, both the potatoes and the steak, in a heartbeat. Hope you really enjoyed today's video. If you did, please let YouTube know by smashing that thumbs up button, and let me know by hitting subscribe to catch future videos. Until next time, I'm James from Smoking Dad Barbecue, signing off. And remember, don't be afraid to fire it up.